In Genesis chapter 4, we are presented with the widely known dynamic between Cain and his brother Abel. In short, Cain rose up one day and killed his brother in a fit of jealousy over the metaphysical parameters of what was deemed to be acceptable sacrifice. And while there's no indication about what measures Cain might have taken to conceal his brother's body, it was clearly a scenario of general plausible deniability. That was until God asked him about it, and the quote-unquote dodge of the ages was uttered for the first time. Am I my brother's keeper? But that's not the phrase that wound up standing out to me. It was the posthumous testimony against Cain by Abel himself, or rather the blood of Abel through the secondary voice of God. What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. It was when I read this that I realized all abominations require that the books be balanced in the ledger of justice one day. Abel's blood had a voice and demanded it, and I will assert the blood of the missing are making these same petitions everywhere and always. You and I just can't hear it audibly. But just because we can't hear it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to answer them by ultimately finding the truth for them. And such is today's brief discussion on Woolly Swamp Radio. The Tri-Counties regions of Shasta, Tehama, and Trinity in Northern California have had their share of high-profile crimes throughout the years. In 1977, Cameron Hooker would be convicted of the infamous girl-in-the-box crime, in which he would enslave Colleen Stan, a young hitchhiker, for 7 years in a box enclosure under his bed, sometimes for 23 hours a day. The other hour was, of course, for unspeakable abuses. In the 1980s, serial rapist and ultimate killer Darrell Rich would terrorize the region until he was ultimately caught and subsequently executed for his crimes, which culminated in the rape and murder of 11-year-old Annette Seelix, whom was thrown from the Johns Creek Bridge on northbound Interstate 5 north of Redding to a 109-foot death on the shores of Shasta Lake. A death that wasn't instant, that happened in the dark, and was found ultimately the next day by fishermen who were able to provide testimony that there were signs that she did not immediately die from her injuries. Then there are the missing person cases. On August 22nd, 1998, 16-year-old Tara Smith was last seen at the corner of Old Alturas and Old Oregon Trail, dropped off by 29-year-old martial arts instructor and surreptitious boyfriend Troy Zink on the heels of what was stated to be a verbal altercation. He denied any involvement in her disappearance and was only convicted in the court of public opinion, owing to the creep-tastic 13-year chasm between her as a minor and him as an adult male. No answers have arisen in 26 years later. Some speculated that she ran away and might walk back into the picture after age 18, but this didn't happen. Most assume now that she's no longer sentient or with us in any capacity. Mr. Zink is stated to be living somewhere in Arizona. But no case garnered more media coverage, energy, and broadband assistance from the public than one of Sherri Papini. And none would take an invested public and force them through the psychological cheesecloth of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance more than this one. The psychological crucible of a 22-day investment by a trusting community would and continues to inflict forward damage on a case currently at its apex, Nikki Cheng Saelee-Mccain, which we will come back to in a moment. This podcast isn't so much a deep dive into her case, at least not right now, but more of an analysis of how much damage was inflicted by the Papini hoax. For those that want a singular deep dive into the Papini story, I would recommend the Hulu documentary series, The Perfect Wife, The Mysterious Disappearance of Sherri Papini. For the sake of this truncated podcast, here are the skeletal facts. November 2nd, 2016, 34-year-old Sherri Papini left home under the pretense of jogging and then promptly disappeared into the ether. Her husband, Keith, was working his shift at Best Buy when the initial events unfolded. Returning home under what we thought would be normal circumstances, he could not find Sherri anywhere. Using the Find My iPhone feature, Keith located her earbuds and phone at the corner of Sunrise and Old Oregon Trail near their home, along with some of Sherri's distinctly blonde hair, which invoked a traumatic scenario immediately in the mind of Keith. A 22-day blitzkrieg would be underway involving citizens, search parties, posters, flyers, ads, billboards, and vacillating suspicions about the culpability of Keith Papini. Hundreds of podcasts and YouTube channels vented their collective spleens, and Keith Papini spent a majority of this period as the de facto murder suspect in the minds of 10 million ad hoc Angela Lansburys, makeshift Matlocks, contrivance Columbos, gooftastic Gregory Houses, and second-string Sherlocks that thought that their effectual wielding of Occam's razor was flawless. But while these malignant Miss Marples were all waxing superior, Sherri Papini would suddenly and inexplicably be found on Thanksgiving Day. She was found on the side of County Road 17 in Yolo County, 150 miles from Ground Zero. She would have a broken nose, chopped hair, and was branded with the word Exodus on her shoulder. She presented a story of being kidnapped and held in captivity by two Hispanic females. Searches were underway, bulletins were released, and the story, while dubious, was granted goodwill, pending the investigative sides. Ultimately, DNA would lead authorities to the home of Papini's ex-boyfriend, James Reyes, who laconically told the authorities he had been with her the whole time and that he even purchased the wood-burning kit to brand her. Papini most likely did not anticipate the groundswell of community support and realized she was going to have more than a closed domestic excuse because the public was into her. In March of 2022, Papini was arrested. 6 weeks later, she pled guilty to the orchestrating hoax and all related false statements. Now, ultimately, she received a sentence of 18 months in prison and had to pay $309,000, just under $400,000 in restitution for institutional investigative costs. And ultimately, she paid a heavier price by losing her family, her husband, her children. Keith was able to redeem most of his reputation after the video evidence of her confession vindicated him as another victim, but the damage was still done. Now, to Nikki Cheng Saelee-Mccain. Nikki Cheng Saelee-Mccain is 4'11", 39 years old, and the beautiful mother of 4 children. She is also missing since May 17th, 2024, and her sisters, Kay, May, and Chloe are in the epicenter of trying to find her. Nikki was apparently last in communication with the family on May 17th when she was visiting a family member of her husband in the hospital, and from there, communication was spotty. But later in the evening, Nikki stated she was on her way to, quote, drop off her mother-in-law's car, unquote, and one of her husband's friends would be driving her home from there. She would not be heard from again, despite Chloe trying to text her late into the night and even early into the morning of the 18th. Ultimately, her husband, Tyler, would tell the sisters that he hadn't heard from her for some time. A missing persons report was filed on May 21st. 4 days later, Nikki's 2002 pewter-colored Chevy Avalanche with California plate DP154UT was located in western Tehama County, and no sign of Nikki. From there, a number of suspicious dynamics had played out. Prior to her disappearance, she was involved in a domestic legal matter with her husband. He had pled not guilty to 4 felony charges stemming from an alleged incident of domestic violence in December of 2023, and because Nikki was not present for the court date, the charges were dismissed July 5th. She had suffered severe injuries. The dismissal, of course, prompted not only a high degree of community outrage, but also created immediate theories about who may or may not have been involved with Nikki's disappearance. Shasta County District Attorney Stephanie Bridget addressed this dismissal during a Facebook interview and other statements. Quote, "I hear the community's pleas for answers and justice for Nikki Cheng McCain," she said. "I share those sentiments and frustrations." Bridget described the decision to drop the charges as difficult, however. Quote, "In the United States, everyone has a constitutional right to confront the witnesses against them," unquote. That means the accuser, the victim, must be present in the trial to testify against them, and we haven't been able to locate her. The dismissal, she said, preserves our ability to refile the case once Nikki is located or sufficient evidence is obtained to utilize her statements in her absence. You can obviously see the various theoretical calculuses that can go into this particular piece of the puzzle. Tyler was also arrested in May of this year on unrelated gun charges and again in July on traffic and subsequent gun charges. July of 2024, he was also cited for starting a fire in Olinda that destroyed vehicles at their residence. And there was another fire that broke out in the area as well that just rose the hackles of the community in general. It goes without saying that the average true crime Nostradamus holds a high suspicion for someone who seems to draw the attention of law enforcement so regularly. I'm not going to begin to speculate from my wee little podcast. Not helping matters is that he has not participated in events regarding Nikki's return, namely the public rallies. Not a good look for sure, but we aren't speculating anything further. So that's the short story recap. There are other people heavily invested in this story and know every wrinkle and nuance possible. I don't know those. Redding Rancheria is offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to Nikki's location. Shasta County Secret Witness and the Kingsman Philanthropic Group are offering $10,000 respectively, bringing the reward to a cumulative $30,000 reward if Nikki can be located. The phone numbers and links I will add in my show description here. So it is possible that despite a very dedicated core of family and friends that are looking for Nikki, that the community as a whole have been inured to it by the Papini situation. My whole point was that there was a lot of degree of goodwill that was eaten up in that period of time, and it is just my hope. I'm not going to speculate that it is a complete bit of damage, but I do know that the core of people looking for Nikki are really close friends and family, and that motivation has to project outward very heavily from there to garner any larger community involvement. I do believe the community has an honest look at this, and I don't think that cynicism has prevailed so far that they automatically have written off guilt or innocence for any obviating parties. But at the same time, I don't think they're ready to dismiss them out of hand. This one does feel different, I have to admit, but that's all I really know looking at whatever facts appear to be out there. As they say, somebody knows something. And I'm just here to do my part in the hopes that someone may have seen Nikki's vehicle or person on or about of May 17th, 2024, or God willing, after that fact, and can offer a glimpse of hope, or at a bare minimum, information. Time is certainly no friend to hope as it drags on for sure. Prayers for all here. And if there's anything a near anonymous podcast can do to help, you know I will. For now, that's it for Woolly Swamp Radio.